Good evening, everyone. I'm Jen Armstrong, the Director of Alumni Engagement at Monmouth College. Welcome to Title IX Turns 50, a celebration of women in athletics, presented by the Monmouth College Alumni Association and Monmouth College's Title IX Committee. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the panelists with us tonight. Joni Comstock is NCAA Senior Vice President for Championships. Louise Mccleary is interim NCAA VP for Division III. Heather Benning is the Commissioner of the Midwest Conference. Raven Robinson, Monmouth College graduate 2014, is the Associate Director of the Visit Experience, a mission and aid at Washington University in St. Louis. And our moderator, Dr. Simon Cordery, History Department at Iowa State University. Before we begin, I'm going to go through a few quick housekeeping items. This event will be recorded and available on the Monmouth College website next week. For the best viewing experience during the presentation, please ensure that you are in speaker mode, which can be selected in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Attendees can ask questions for the panelists using the chat feature on their screen. We will read and answer as many of those questions as we can at the end of today's panel discussion. Also, at the end of today's event, you'll see a short 3-minute survey appear in your web browser. Please feel free to use this survey to offer your feedback and suggestions for future events. For those of you in the Midwest, you know that we are experiencing unique weather. We appreciate your patience if we have any technical difficulties. I think the storm has passed us here in Monmouth, but if we lose our connection, we'll reconnect as soon as possible. So, a half-century ago, Title IX changed the landscape for women. Enacted in 1972, Title IX's 37 words are simple. No person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any educational program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Title IX's significance is often connected to sports. To be sure, the federal legislation would become a game changer. Female participation in high school athletics increased from 294,000 in 1972 to 3.4 million in 2019. In addition to expanding opportunities for women on the court and in the field, Title IX created a myriad of opportunities for women in leadership. Today, 94% of women working in C-suite positions played a sport in high school or college. And we have quite an audience with us tonight. We have numerous loyal Monmouth College alumni with us, and many of which participated in Fighting Scots athletics. And I also want to shout out some of the groups of Monmouth students watching tonight. We have Professor Jen Braun's class called Athlete, Commodity, or Human, Dr. Joan Wartz's health psychology class, and Coach Alexa McClory and the Fighting Scots softball team are watching. Also in the audience is Monmouth College President, Dr. Clarence Wyatt. We are thankful for his leadership and commitment to equity and inclusion so that we can host impactful events like this one. We are so thrilled that so many of you could join us tonight from our Monmouth family, from our Midwest Conference partners, and more. Tonight, I also want to take time to thank Monmouth College's Title IX Committee. We wouldn't be here tonight without their collaboration and support. They are a committee of athletic alumni from the various decades and sports formed last summer to help promote the 50th anniversary of Title IX. It includes planning celebratory events like this one, reuniting teammates, and connecting alumni to current Fighting Scots athletes. The committee members are Connie Beatty, class of 1981, Christine Farr, class of 1990, Karen Hillis, class of 1993, Liz Thiele, class of 2018, Erin LaFerry, class of 2015, Riley Mann, class of 2021, Molly McNamara Klinger, class of 2003, Michelle Perry, class of 1989, Heather Robertson, class of 1990, Penny Rowan, class of 1992, Carrie Shimon, class of 1997, Kaylin Sommer, class of 2019, and Jeannie Talbot, class of 1995, Ashley Tanny, class of 2008, and Susan Wachowski, class of 1991. A very special shout out goes to Michelle Perry. This committee and celebration were the results of her vision and passion to support women in athletics. Thank you for your leadership, Michelle. And we're glad and very intentionally hosting this discussion on National Women and Girls in Sport Day. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to the show to Simon Cordery, History Department Chair at Iowa State University. He is there now, but he has a strong connection to Monmouth. Simon and his wife, Stacy, were Monmouth College faculty for years and have stayed connected to our alumni and our campus community since. They are ardent supporters of Monmouth and women's rights. And Simon was notably the coach of the first women's soccer team at Monmouth. And while from what I hear, those first years might have been a little bit rocky, he and his team leave a legacy here at Monmouth. In 2019, our women's soccer team won the Midwest Conference Championship. So Dr. Cordery, the floor, or shall I see the screen, is yours.
Thank you very much, Jen. We had to play Grinnell twice a year. That's why it was so rocky. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here for this wonderful event. And I have to tell you that I had a marvelous time being a beneficiary of Title IX, being invited to coach the Monmouth College Fighting Scots women's soccer team. We may not have won very many games, but we always had fun. And ultimately, I think it's those memories that made it worthwhile. I was head coach for 7 years, and it's wonderful for me now to see so many of the players from that era in the audience, and also to see so many current Monmouth College student athletes here expressing an interest in the past. It's heartening for me as a trained historian to see such interest in that past. That makes sense because this evening's discussion is going to be about an extraordinarily important moment and its consequences in the recent past. It's also, I must admit, something of a neglected history. We tend today to take Title IX for granted. We forget about the revolution that it started. It's fair to say that without Title IX, the world of sports as we know it today simply wouldn't exist. It would not be as we find it. I'm going to go back, as Jen did, to those original words of Title IX of the 1972 Education Amendments, to the language that changed our understanding of gender. That wording bears repeating. No person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. As Jen said, 37 words. In those 37 words, no mention of sports, nothing about athletics, not a word on competition. The realm of sports, however, was the most obviously unequal area of education in the United States at the time. And that's why Title IX had the impact that it did and that it continues to have today. Title IX challenged some dearly held cultural norms and social myths. It challenged the idea that organized sports should be a masculine and exclusively masculine area of activity. Before the passage of Title IX, this notion, the idea that only men should participate in organized sports, had very real consequences. Most obviously, the vast majority of funding and media coverage of sports focused on men's sports. That disparity is not quite as glaring as it was in 1972, but as we will hear this evening, Title IX did meet some immediate and sustained resistance. Actual change was slow, and there still is much to be done. One small but telling anecdote: type into any search engine the name of your favorite college or university and the name of a sport, and almost invariably, the men's sport will come up first, usually not even identified as a men's sport. This is about perception. Gender is a perception shaping people's understanding of and approach to reality, our understanding of what is and what should be. That understanding is changing, and it's changing in part because of Title IX. Happily, this evening, we have a distinguished panel of experts who are going to take over and talk about Title IX at 50 and to help us celebrate women in athletics. Let me turn the Zoom spotlight over to Dr. Joni Comstock, Senior Vice President for Championships and Senior Women Administrator for the NCAA. Dr. Comstock is going to tell you a little bit more about her amazing career, and she's going to answer the question with which we begin tonight's discussion. That question is, how has Title IX changed the landscape for women in sports. Dr. Comstock.
Thank you, and good evening. I want to thank you, all of you, for inviting us to be a part of this tonight and for the discussion that we can have about all of the opportunities now that we appreciate and enjoy around sport for women. So just a very brief discussion or about my career and again, opportunities because of Title IX. I was in high school in the 70s, and so really saw the beginning of Title IX and the beginning of those opportunities for women. And it was very, very simple. I played on the basketball team, and we were thrilled the first year that we had a team that we had the opportunity to play 10 games and just continued to, again, enjoy all of those, the opportunities that were availed to me and to others in my age group. Attended Eastern Illinois University. I'm also a native from Illinois. And at that point decided that I wanted to teach and coach, did that for a few years, and then went to graduate school and had the opportunity to work for over 20 years in a variety of institutions in athletic administration. And just, I think the most important thing that I want to share about all of that is that none of those things from 1972 to today would be possible without Title IX. And as I've gone through my career, I have seen, again, so many opportunities, doors open, mentors and others encouraging me. And as I have gotten later in my career, I hope that what I have done is, again, encouraged and provided opportunities for others to do the same. The last 15 years, I've had the opportunity to be a part of the NCAA National Office. And as Simon said, I've been Senior Vice President for Championships here at the NCAA. And so I have a staff of about 85 people, and we provide 84 of the 90 championships in 23 sports for the NCAA across all three divisions. So I would say that from the time that I left Eastern Illinois and began to teach up until today, it is a privilege. And as I said before, it's something that would not have been possible without Title IX. And there's so many days that I get the opportunity to watch the incredible student athletes and coaches. I'm amazed that I get the opportunity to be paid to do such a wonderful thing and to be around, again, the student athletes and the coaches. With respect to really the things that have changed about opportunities for women in sport because of Title IX, I mean, I think we can say just in one sentence, really everything. We didn't really have, other than just very recreational sorts of opportunities, we didn't have any organized sport until Title IX came about. And so over these 50 years, whether it has been participation opportunities, the level and quality of coaching, financial aid, and all of the support and things around, again, opportunity to participate has changed dramatically. I think Simon said, that we have a ways to go with some of the things that he pointed out, and we all have to be very vigilant about that. But whether it is, again, all of the participation opportunities in the sport or the career opportunities that I have experienced, and so many others would not have been possible without really the force of Title IX over these 50 years.
Okay, thanks, Joni. Let's move on to the next question. Heather, I'm going to ask you about diversity and equity. We know that diversity and equity are important in work culture. Can you tell us why it is important to see bosses and leaders that look like you? Is there something or someone that you can attribute to changing the trajectory of your career?
Thank you, Simon. I think diversity of perspective and compositional diversity are important in our society for a lot of reasons, but specific to the question about work culture, I think that seeing someone who looks like you, whether that's skin color, age, gender, family status, provides a relational access that makes opportunities seem like possibilities that we can make our own reality. And I'm going to kind of dovetail on the back of what Joni said. I was born in 1973. So by the time I was old enough to play sports, I don't think that I was struck maybe as abruptly as Joni was about the opportunities that presented themselves all of a sudden in sport. But over 30 years ago, when I was in junior high and high school, I never thought it was extraordinary or atypical that a majority of my coaches were women. And these weren't just female coaches, but they were very successful female coaches. Our high school volleyball coach won 9 state championships, and she held the nation's record for most wins with 503. I mean, I walked into a legend when I played high school volleyball, and people said, Low Hunter's known across this country for being on the cutting edge. We were one of the first high school sports to wear what you call like the butt hugger shorts. And we were mortified, but she was sure this was like the next great thing in volleyball. She won 182 consecutive games in volleyball over a 6-year span. So I grew up like with an amazing mentor. At the time, I didn't realize what she was doing was so exceptional. I just thought of it from a competitive lens, but not because she was a female achieving these amazing things. My high school gym is now named after her. If you search Low Hunter, she's in all sorts of Hall of Fames, and she was a huge advocate for girls' opportunity in sport. But I had no awareness of that as someone in high school in the late 80s and early 90s. It was our female coach who led my soccer team my sophomore through senior year that took our team to the last Colorado State Championship game before there were class divisions. And I grew up in the mountains of Colorado in an unincorporated, very small community, in some ways very similar to rural Iowa where I live now, just not in a metropolitan space. And we ended up winning that game 3-0 over a city team that was 3 times our size. Again, a female coach leading our team to competitive success. And all I saw it as was a great opportunity to play sport and to have this fantastic coach who happened to be a woman. In my high school, it was the volleyball team and the soccer team that brought the students and the community to fill the stands. So again, my lens at that time is very different than how I've come to appreciate how extraordinary that was, especially given all the things about geography where I grew up. Just again, this ties a little bit more into who I am, and I'm going to get directly to the specific question that you asked. It is leading there. But when I was recruited to play soccer in college, I was recruited by a female coach. And I finished my career playing for a female coach. And I played basketball for a female coach at one school. And then when I transferred, I played for a female coach at another school. And for those of you in the audience, I was a student athlete at Cornell College for my first 3 years before I transferred to Grinnell College, both Midwest Conference institutions. And during that time, those 5 years that I was an undergraduate, my director of athletics at both schools was a woman. So I realized in hindsight, like, that my experience was not like a lot of other female athletes at that time, but, and it didn't seem extraordinary, but in hindsight, I realized how seeing women in those roles, to me, it's like when you drive up to the bank and you see that green neon open light illuminated, and it was welcoming me into coaching and athletic administration as a reasonable and achievable career. So when you talk about like pivotal moments, it was never one specific thing, but when I look back, I see that there was never a barrier thrown up in front of me because there were people who looked like me that I had relation to that were doing something that I eventually had a passion to pursue. So I think that that's really significant. The other thing I do want to add to that question is that sometimes it isn't always someone that looks like you that can affirm your potential or encourage you to pursue, in this case, your career in a space that may be dominated by others who don't look like you. And that's something that's really important to me. This isn't just a women's issue. There aren't issues that are just Black people's issues. There aren't issues that are just for the LGBTQ community. There are advocates and allies out there in all of these spaces. And I think it's also important in this context because I said I went away to college with, or maybe I skipped over the piece about just eventually what I want to do is go to college and be a teacher and a coach. But more specifically, my initial plan was to be certified as a history teacher because that's where my passion was. But I had a really high competency in math. And there's a point that I can remember exactly what the classroom looked like. I can remember the exchange when I had my AP calculus teacher who had to be over 50, at least 6 feet tall, or everybody seems 6 feet tall when you're only 5'2". So he was definitely a lot taller than I was. It was a male. And he came up to me and he said, Heather, have you ever thought about being a math teacher? You are really good at math and we need more women teaching it. And that one unsolicited comment did change my trajectory. It made me realize that I should pursue my passion, which was history, and also my competency, which was math, because I knew at that moment, if I followed Mr. Guard's advice, I was going to be more marketable and hoping to land that job when I graduated from high school. So I think that's the other piece, is that it's the importance of advocates and allies, as well as seeing people that look like us in positions that can have an impact on the choices that we make in our life, and specific to this question and the trajectory that we might take for our career.
Simon, if I can, I'd like to jump in because I can piggyback on what both Joni and Heather said. But I'm Louise Mccleary. I work with Joni at the national office in Indianapolis. I'm serving as the interim vice president for Division III. I'll give you a quick background on sort of my journey, because I think it's in between where Joni and Heather's journey is. And that's probably because I'm probably right in the middle of their ages. But for me, you know, I was growing up in the 70s. I was very fortunate. I had two parents that were like, doesn't matter your gender, you can, you know, tackle the world, you can do whatever you want. So I had that constant reinforcement, which goes a little bit to what Heather was saying. But I think Old Dominion University, so for those who maybe graduated in the 80s, I heard maybe a few alums, they had one of the best women's basketball programs in the country at the time. And I'm positive they had one of the best teams because of Title IX. And so I grew up watching that. And I was like, right, of course women are winning national titles and they're being competitive and physical with each other and they're excelling. And they were it on the campus at Old Dominion. The men had an okay team. The women sold out every single game. And so I had that, and then I went in the mid 80s to a women's college. So similar to what Heather said, all my coaches were women. My athletics director was a woman. So I was like, well, of course this is how it is. And then when I left college, I went into athletics, and it didn't come to a screeching halt, but I did realize at that point that there were hurdles. There were absolutely hurdles. I was entering a field in the late 80s, early 90s, that was dominated by men. And there weren't many women who said, I would like to go into athletics. I would like to be an athletics director. And so I felt fortunate that I had all the role models leading up to it. I had the benefit of Title IX, which provided opportunities, it provided access, it provided funding. And from there, I was able to have a very successful career on campus for 20 plus years. And I feel fortunate that right now I'm at the national office serving as the interim vice president for a division that's never had a woman leading it. And so that's just been a neat experience for me. And really what I wanted to lead to after what Heather talked about, really anyone can foster and help you grow. And what I've tried to do as a woman who's in athletics, who is in a leadership position, is to be really intentional of how to help other women grow. And one of the ways I do that, so for all the faculty members that may be listening, or the students, or the early career professionals, is I will always engage with any woman who would say, can you help me? Can you spend time with me? Will you let me talk through what my fears are, what my goals are? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. So I think the very first thing as you're trying to foster leadership skills, especially for any women that work with you, is to make sure that you find time to engage with them. The second thing I would say is build a relationship. You may not be their mentor, but you can always be their sponsor. I'm lucky in my position. I get to meet coaches, students, administrators. And as I build that relationship, I then can connect them with other individuals as they share their dreams and aspirations with me. And I think that's critical. I say it a lot. Heather and I have worked very closely, the same with Joni. What I try to do is open doors so those women who are already talented have an opportunity to shine. And so that's what you can do as being a sponsor. And the last two things I always do is I try to foster leadership skills, is I support women. I think we run so many programs at the NCAA, and what I find is we bring women together is that many times, because they're not maybe many of them on their campus, is they need the confidence to say, yes, you can do this. Yes, you can lead, and you're going to be really good at it. And so I'm always there to support them in saying you do have the confidence, but I'm also honest enough to say, here though, or maybe the skills that you need to continue to build to make sure you find success. And the last thing, I'll say this really to the students in the audience watching, dream big and then verbalize what you want to do. You have to say it out loud. You really do. I will tell you, when I was in college, I wanted to be the Secretary of Education. That did not happen. It's okay. But I told everybody that. And obviously things change, but if you don't verbalize it, it makes it really hard for those dreams to come true. So Simon, thanks for letting me jump in.
So Louise, Simon, would you mind if I follow up just with one thing? So first of all, Louise, it's never too late. So I'll help you with that Secretary of Education, and I think all of us will. So you just let us know about that. I just wanted to comment very quickly that through the years, we have all hoped and aspired for young women to have a wonderful career in athletics, and that would include aspiring to be a head coach or an athletic director or a conference commissioner, or like Heather, any of those things. And as I have watched through the years, it really, part of it has truly been that until women can see others in that role, it's hard for them to sort of imagine or, again, sort of, take that path. And so I just was so excited. In November, I attended a conference, and there were a number of student athletes on the panel, and to a woman, the question was, you want a career in athletics, what do you want to be? And it's the first time ever that each of the women said, I want to be an athletic director. And so often it was a role that was still very, very important, associate AD or whatever that would be. But, as Louise said, we should aspire and support one another to their people's highest dreams. And women are very, very capable. And I think finally we are at the point that, young women are seeing people like Heather and others in these leadership positions, and they're realizing that, yes, they can be that as well. So I think it's great. And I just wanted to mention that. So thank you, Simon.
Thanks, Joni. I wonder if we could just switch gears for a moment here and talk about the student athlete experience. And I'm going to invite Raven Robinson to introduce herself and to answer the question about your competition in college athletics at Monmouth. Raven, what was so special about competing at Monmouth? And how does being a competitor help you today in the workplace? And how is that different as a woman?
Hi, everybody. I promise I can talk. I feel like I've been like the very quiet one, but so just to give a little background, I did compete in track and field at Monmouth College, and I graduated in 2014. because we're here and we're talking about it and we're women, we're going to be humble, but still be able to boast about ourselves. I'm a 5-time All-American. I'm very proud of it. I earned it, and I would not have it any other way. And honestly, I didn't grow up with female coaches, actually. My high school coach was a male, and my coach at Monmouth was a male, Brian Woodard at Monmouth. And the special thing about it, though, is that I felt like being a woman in track and field, especially as a thrower, made me feel more empowered, even though I was being coached by a man. Like, I never felt that he treated me any smaller because I was a woman, or patted me on the back more because I might have cried more than the next person. Like, I not to feed into stereotypes, but I think a coach could easily feed into those types of things. But he treated us like athletes. He woke us up at 6 a.m. We went to the weight room. We went to practice. And to me, being able to be treated like an athlete and not delicately, I suppose, what made the program special. And we rocked it. I mean, my 4 years at Monmouth, there was a national qualifier every year. And I think all of that is to attribute to the fact that we felt empowered as women. I think there was like one year our school took a picture of us like holding our shots in the gym, and it's like three girls going to nationals, and we're all excited. But that's what made Monmouth special. It's like you expected that because the program was so good and because we were empowering each other to do well. And how has being a competitor helped me in the workplace? The mindset I had, the discipline you have to have as a student athlete allows me to show up the same way at work. I wake up in the morning, I even still go to the gym, thank goodness. But I wake up in the morning, I go to my job, I put my best foot forward, and I try to leave my mark, which is what I tried to do at Monmouth. So now in my job, as a former competitor, I'm not necessarily competing with my colleagues, but I'm competing with myself in the regards that I want to leave my mark, even though it may be small. Like, how do I leave my name here after I move on to the next position? And that's helped me in the workplace with a competitor mindset. And it's different for me as a woman because I feel like it's expected of men to kind of like come in and do their thing. And women are kind of expected to, especially in a higher education industry and a student affairs field, be the big nurturers or the people who are, like, this is nothing bad, right? But I think my personality is like tough love, I suppose, which is what my competitor mindset is. And so being in student affairs, it can be different as far as what students expect of me as a woman. But then when I'm like, that's on you, that's your responsibility. You got to like hunker down and read the books, or you got to hunker down and give yourself a routine and give yourself a plan. And it's okay to have a plan and the plan go another way. Things like that. It's different for women in that regard. But at the same time, because I have leadership who are women, I'm like, I want to be like her. I want to be like her. And I can find mentors now, and I can build relationships, and I can network, and I can have those same people go to happy hour with me. And also those same people tell me that I need to do this for my resume, or tell me that I need to do this for my job. So all of it stems back to my time at Monmouth. I'm telling you, I was all over that campus doing everything. And I would not be the person that I am today if I did not have that experience. So hopefully that was a way to answer that in a roundabout way, but I loved being a student athlete. And I ended up coaching here at WashU for 5 years when I first got here in track and field. So it never leaves you. Like, somehow it just still comes back to you. And I miss it, but I'm glad I got that experience.
Raven, let me ask you a quick follow-up question. And anyone else can jump in on this as well. How do you answer the question, and do you believe that women lead differently than men?
If I say yes, don't be mad at me. I think, everyone has their own like different leadership style and how they lead. I'll use my time as a coach I took a well-rounded perspective with my student athletes, and some of that came from my experience in student affairs and higher ed. But I didn't just see them as athletes. I saw them as whole persons. I saw them as people who were trying to study, people who had family things going on, people who were trying to build friendships as a first-year athlete and still trying to maintain practice times. And in that regard, I felt like I led differently because I didn't leave this experiences that they had outside of practice. Sometimes that stuff comes in, and sometimes you have to address it and make space or create space for it. And in that way, I felt like when women can lead differently, at least that's how I felt like I led differently than coaches I had seen. And some of that was because my coach allowed space for things to have to unfold or allowed conversations to take place because we weren't going to progress if it didn't. So yeah, in that way, I felt like we lead differently. The whole person matters, and you don't always get to leave that at the door sometimes.
Simon, I may add to that. Right now, I think girls and boys are raised differently. And so there's different culturals. And so that may lead to being a different type leader if you're a woman versus a man. I think those lines every day are blurred a bit more, which I think is actually a benefit. I would say right now, something that Raven maybe has experienced or maybe not, or those who are sort of in their careers, if you're a woman and you don't lead the way the culture has defined women should lead, you get pushback. And I think that's a whole other challenge that we do now have women in leadership positions that you scratch your head to go, okay, you thought I was going to lead this way and I'm not. And so then you have to navigate that. And so it's just constantly ever changing. And so what I would say as you're leading, I watch both men and women, and I see the ones who do things well, and I say, how do I copy that? And the ones who do things that I see maybe fall flat, I say, how do I maybe avoid that? But I don't think we're at a point yet where those cultural lines are blurred enough. There's still stereotypical expectations from women as leaders versus men as leaders. And that's something that I think everybody in this panel probably has faced at one point or another.
You said that perfectly, what she said.
And I would just dovetail on that. I mean, when Louise was talking, it makes me think about even just children and expectations. If a boy is playing with a particular toy that we don't consider to be a toy for a boy or a toy for a girl, and those lines have got blurred, and where we seem to not be so discriminatory in what you should be playing with or what colors you should like or how you want to dress. I think the difference when it comes to leadership and professionalism, because we still haven't really fully progressed in that way, the stakes are higher. And so it impacts the way that you may choose to lead because of what Louise says, other people's expectation of how you should lead, as opposed to, do I lead differently because I identify as a woman? I don't think so. I lead the way that I think is best for the environment that I'm in. The same type of examples that Raven gave, like what is appropriate for this situation. I lead very differently when I'm in my role as executive director of the Midwest Conference than I lead when I was chair of management council, or I'm an ex officio member of the board of governors. I have to identify what's the appropriate way to lead given the environment that I'm in. But I do think that those stereotypes exist out there, and they influence how we might respond in those environments. In my case, as a white woman, and it might be different for others who identify as different identities, and what the expectations culturally are for them in their leadership role.
So Simon, I'm going to rely on my panelists, but I'll start this because it then begs the question, especially for the students in the audience or those just starting their careers, you know, what may all of us sort of, I'm not going to use the word advice, but things to ponder as they are trying to develop their leadership skills. And so one of the things that I would offer to everyone, I actually have this quote in my office. It's a quote that says, "I'm not afraid of storms, as I'm learning how to sail my ship. And that's Louisa May Alcott. And really what it means is to try to tamp down that fear of failing. And at the end of the day, know that as you go through your career, you're going to have missteps, you're going to falter, and then sometimes you're just going to have a plain old failure. And what you're going to do is pick yourself back up, and you're going to learn from it, and you're going to find a way to do it differently. Along with that, I always recommend that you challenge yourself. Right? If you're a student athlete, you do that all the time. And many times you do that because a coach is challenging you. But if you can have that inner drive, especially as you're starting your career, to say, let me stretch myself, let me find ways to grow, and let me find those who will stretch and help me grow, but in a safe manner, so that if I trip and fall, they're there to reach down, pick me up, and point me back on that path again. And the last thing I would say, as you're developing those leadership skills and you're trying to find ways to set yourself apart, one of the best things that I think you can do in this space is find ways to help whoever is supervising you to see around corners, is the way I put it. Can you find and see where the issues may be and start to come up with solutions? And use your voice. Many times women, you know, I say this all the time to Heather mentioned management council that I work with at the NCAA. For the women on the council, many times I'll say, use your voice. You're at the table. Let's hear what you have to say about it. So if you can combine that, using your voice and seeing around corners, I think your leadership journey will be a very good one.
Simon, if I could just also add a couple of things. I think all of the comments made were just incredible. And I think too, that's one of the wonderful things through the years about the experience of sport, is that women really, through all of these, you know, being able to participate, that we have learned to both win and lose, and to go on from both of those. And so I hope that for all women, that, as Louise said, that we're willing to risk, that we are willing to really speak very assertively about our goals, about what we want, reach out to those networks and ask people to help. That's one of the things that I think of my first role as director of athletics. There was a donor that came into me one day, and we were talking, and he said to me, you know, why don't you ask me for what you really want? Speak up, because I will help you. And so from that day forward, I have really tried to remember to do that people want to help other people. And so just say so. But then also, as I said earlier, I think it's very, very important that all of us, as we have successes and opportunities and we move through our careers, it's incredibly important to help and remember others. You know, we need to. Raven's a young woman that's got tremendous potential. So now I know her, and if she calls me, I'm going to help. I just need to know what it is that she wants. She's going to have my phone number, and she can have me on speed dial or whatever it is, and we're connected. And if I can advance her career, I'm all about it. And so I think that's just one of the things that, you know, that through my career, so many people have helped me, but it's even more important right now that I reach and bring along other young women and young men, for that matter, and give them and help them along so that they can have successes and great opportunities in their career.
Let me throw a question out there for everyone or anyone to answer, whoever wants to pick this one up. We're talking about leadership, and I wonder if you could tell us something about the challenges and especially the rewards of working in leadership. I mean, Joni, you talk about helping people, being able to facilitate people's careers. What are some of the other rewards that you get from working in what can be an incredibly frustrating field, leadership, but there are reasons to stick with it.
I can answer some. So reward of leadership is, yes, helping people, but I'll go personal. I just feel good, you know, like I think as I started as an entry level, then I worked my butt off and then got into an assistant director position, and I'm now in an associate director position, all before 30, which was my goal. But at the same time, the biggest reward is feeling like the hard work that I put in is I'm actually seeing the result, no matter how many times I failed or didn't do so well at something or had to be pulled in, you know, because I was too passionate about something. It still feels good to be on the other side of it because I kept going. And so if that is an example of like perseverance, the reward is being able to see the students that I've been able to impact and also try to like bring along and help them with their plan. But personally, I feel like I can keep going. And that makes me feel good because of the perseverance and the ability to just kind of like hunker down, I suppose, and go after it. No matter what it is, I'm telling you, my career is probably going to change in the next 5 years. I get married in 23 days. So my whole career might just be like, you know what? I just want to be an entrepreneur. I have no idea, but I'm excited for that. And that's the reward of leadership as well, because now I can lead my own life. Like I don't have to be a follower in my own journey. I can just be like, I'm going to make a decision and go after it. If it doesn't work, I'm going to try something else. So.
So if I could just follow that a little bit, I think that's a great point. It's, you know, I think so much of leadership is setting the vision and the goal, and then really, I think a lot of times just get out of the way and let incredible people, you know, do their work and fulfill their roles. And that my job as a leader really is, once I set that broad vision, then just help support and again, let them do what they're capable of doing. And I think some of my most rewarding moments were when people accomplish those great things and they really felt like the pride of it, that they did it on their own, and that, again, my role was just to be quietly in the background and really encouraging the great accomplishments that I saw from them.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Let's switch gears for a little bit now and talk about gender inequity. How do you see gender inequities playing out in your workplace today?
Well, I'll offer a couple of things. Simon, we take a lot of pride at the NCAA for, again, providing the infrastructure and the opportunity for 500,000 student athletes to participate. But over the last year or so, we had some questions about really the experience of the student athletes and how we were doing some things within championships. And I'll just say that at times I think we go along and maybe whether it's just our vision or but things get blurry, and that it is very, very easy to really kind of lose sight of and really paying attention to providing equitable opportunities for everyone in this case in our championships. And so we've been working very hard the last year or two to be sure that we're looking more closely. But I've worked at the NCAA now, as I said earlier, for 15 years, and very, very proud of the opportunities that we've given to everyone. But it's easy to lose sight of some of the details and where you are exactly. And I don't feel good about some of the things that we've had to deal with in the last few months. But I'm so glad that they came to our attention, and we're working so hard to make sure that those experiences of all of our student athletes that they feel good about them, that they're fully supported, and that they realize that whether it's the institutions or from the national office at the NCAA, that we're committed to all of them, men and women, to make sure that those experiences are equitable. But it's easy to lose sight of it, we all have to work together to make sure that that doesn't happen.
I could just add, because I know I talked about this in one of our prep calls, and maybe many of the people that are participating don't know the history of the Midwest Conference, but I'm kind of on the opposite side of this, and I've worked with Louise on professional development panels before, and I'm really a big advocate of finding work in an environment where you feel like the values of that environment align with your personal values. And so it's not going to be surprising that, with my work with the Midwest Conference, and I didn't give my history, but I played in the league, I coached in the league, I was an athletic administrator in the league, and now I'm the executive director of the league. One of the very unique things about the Midwest Conference is that we are the 7th oldest Division III conference in the country. We're over 100 years old. We celebrated that 100th anniversary last year during the COVID year, so it wasn't as celebratory as it might otherwise have been with events, but we are 100 years old. But what I think a lot of people don't know is that our current composition is the result of the merger of a women's athletic conference and a men's athletic conference. So it's truly the men's athletic league that goes back to 1921, but there was a women's conference that paralleled it. And that was in existence from the 70s up through the early 90s, and had come under the single umbrella in the very early 90s, just before we started like the soccer programs that Simon talked about earlier that he coached and that I played in. But if we talk about inequities, one of kind of the balances that we have in place for the Midwest Conference is when that merger occurred on the women's side, that was all led by females, said, sure, we can come under one umbrella administratively. There makes a lot of logic to coming under one umbrella from an administrative operational standpoint, but we're going to keep our spot at the table. So our governance structure is a structure where every conference in the Midwest league has 2 representatives, and that representative there, the way it was written initially was it is an athletic representative of women's sports and an athletic representative of men's sports. And we have retained that since that merger. And so we, in our athletic council, always will have 2 institutional representatives. And in my experience in the league, we always bring the discussion of equity to decisions that we make. And so it doesn't mean that we are without gaps in equity. I'm sure that, if any organization went through the type of analysis that the NCAA went through this last year with championships, you would find areas where there are inequities, whether it's around gender or other spaces. But it is something that regularly comes up in conversation when we consider proposals from sport committees and say, what does this look like from a gender equity lens? And so just to back to my original point, I love the league that I work for. And that's one of the reasons, is because the values of the Midwest Conference and diversity, inclusion, and gender equity, I think we live those out in day-to-day conversations. And it goes right to the core of our history. And it's something that we've retained all the way up to present day.
Simon, I know we're running short on time. It's been a great hour, but what Joni and Heather said, how I put a fine point on it is, if we're not intentional on our campuses or in our workplaces to look for the inequities, it's easy to say, well, that's the way it was always done, right? How many times have you heard somebody say that? Well, that's how it's always done. And it's difficult right now. Having a pandemic, life is not easy. I've said this a lot, but we need to be intentional to really get people together. They don't have to be like-minded. You actually probably don't want them to be like-minded, and say, let's really look at this, find where the inequities are, and then make a commitment to change it. And I think if you do that, you're going to have progress and success in making it more equitable. And as Heather mentioned, not just for gender, but for other things that are going on in our country at the moment.
Raven, go ahead.
Not to switch, maybe combine a little bit of the equity, switch gears. There was a question in there around other identity factors, so LGBTQ, race, ethnicity. And then it says, curious to know how other identity factors interact with gender over the last 50 years, if that helps. You know, as a woman of color and as a Black woman, seeing others that looked like me in the sport, especially because being a field performer was not necessarily, I just didn't always see like Black women throwing the shot put, and that wasn't what was around in my neighborhood, and it was unique for even my family. They just expected kind of basketball or volleyball. I was good at neither, so we had to find something else. And so it was important to me to feel accepted when I changed my hair, when I just like have family celebrations. However, if I have certain slang, whatever it is, like I needed to feel comfortable, and I didn't need somebody to be like, let me touch your hair, let me like, you know, try to be like me. I just needed to feel comfortable. And now when I go into spaces as a professional, because I know what I need to feel comfortable, because I was okay. I think Louise said those words of saying what I wanted and saying what I need. Now I seek spaces where there are faces like me, but even if there aren't faces like me, that they have an understanding of what my identity means to me and are able to at least cater to that, to support, to professional development, to even just respecting family. I think it's important to know who you are so you can also vocalize that to other people, and then they can also figure out if they are able to support you or not. And if they can't, then that's probably not a space that you want to occupy, because it's not good for your mental, it's not good for your health. And overall, while it may be a stepping stone, if 2020 has taught us anything, COVID has taught us anything, there can be another way. So don't put yourself at risk or at detriment in regards for a position, because women, we don't have to do that anymore if we don't want to. We can find another way to get to where we need to go. So I would say those identity factors matter to me the most as an athlete, and also now in my professional career.
Raven, that's great. This is Jen Armstrong again. I turned on my camera to try to pivot over to some of the questions in the Q&A, which Raven, you did beautifully with Ann Gary's question. She's class of 1965. We also have a question from Cynthia Hart. She's class of 1976. And she writes, when Title IX was proposed, the opponents argued that it would destroy minor sports for men because the women's sports would actually use up all the resources. 50 years later, did that actually happen?
Well, I'll just quickly say, we really, through the years, I think we can look to statistics and many, many things to say no. And what we've done is, I want to believe we've all worked hard to provide more opportunities. And so we've seen some loss of intercollegiate programs through the years, but for the most part, what has happened from Title IX is an incredible expansion. I think that clearly is our challenge and our opportunity going forward, that whether it's the financial issues and strains around the pandemic or whatever those things are, we have to work together, because the value of the sport experience for women and for men is just too powerful for us to let something happen to it. So.
And also, I'm going to do something a little different than we talked about. We have an alum in the audience, and her name is Deborah Flowers, and she has a story to tell. She was on, she was the first woman on the Monmouth College tennis team. But Heather, I think you have a question from a woman from Ripon College in the audience. And while I'm doing that, maybe you can speak to that.
No, I appreciate, I work with Michelle Whitler in her current capacity, and I had no idea. If anybody reads that in the chat, I think is a neat history piece. So Michelle Whitler, who's in the office of the registrar now at Ripon College, at the time that I was making reference to, was the faculty athletic rep on the men's side of the conference. And during that time also served as president, which I just, again, the uniqueness and extraordinary nature of women in sport and the organizations that I've been a part of. So I look forward to hearing more about that perspective from you, Michelle. Thank you.
Deborah, can you hear us? And can we hear you? It looks like your mute is on.
Got better?
Yes.
Okay.
So we would love to hear your story. You were our Scott of the Week and about a year ago, and you talked about trying out for the tennis team at Monmouth.
Right. Well, I have to say, I have enjoyed watching the panelists and how far it's come, how women's sports at Monmouth, because 1972, I was a lowly little freshman at Monmouth, and I had played tennis my entire life. I had a tennis racket in my hand at 5. So when I got to Monmouth, they had up in the student union a bulletin board that said to sign up for the sports. So little did I know that I signed up, and I went in to sign up at the gym, the old gym. And long story short, after I signed up, I realized I was the only woman there. And so I ended up, they accepted me on the team, and I competed on Monmouth's men's tennis team my freshman year. And then my sophomore year, a coach by the name of Carol Fredrickson, which was with Monmouth, she was not only the women's tennis coach, but she was also the softball coach. So I just thought it'd be interesting to pass that on.
That's so great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. Jen Braun in the audience, she's a professor, and she asked, what sort of challenges do you foresee NIL bringing to women in sport?
So Jen, I'll jump in. I know Joni and Heather, and I bet even Raven, this has crossed her table as well. Right now, a lot of broadcasting and sort of all of the media rights, both at many conferences, focuses on men's sports. And so there's more money swirling in that space today than for women. I'm hopeful that will change over the years. And we've seen that with the success of women's basketball, volleyball, and really the softball World Series every spring. But at the moment, there's more money connected to men's sports. And so at what that has translated into very early, name, image, and likeness is not even a year old, that more money is going towards male student athletes than female. Will that change over time? Possibly. But I think I couldn't say with certainty today how that will play out. Obviously, the NCAA would love to have some assistance from the federal government to say, can we regulate this a bit more versus having state by state rules and regulations? There have been so many benefits for name, image, and likeness for student athletes. They've done some wonderful things with it. And like anything, there's also been some things that probably are not as beneficial, where students have connected their name to something that maybe they're going to end up regretting. And so it's early. Right now, I would say women are definitely not receiving the same opportunities as men, but that's also reflective of our women's championships at all levels are maybe not receiving the same opportunities as our men's championships. So again, I think that's something that every day Title IX will help this, other supporting will help this, that will start to change that culture. And that may down the road also even out those opportunities for women.
Great, thank you.
So we have a question about working in the sports world. How is working in the sports world different from other careers?
The only career I've known, so I'm not qualified to answer that question.
So
was
I
going to say the
only
same
have like my
thing, Heather.
small stint in working in the sports world as a part-time coach while working in higher ed. I'd say it's different in regards. Every career I feel like has like a welcome challenge, right? And I think that the opportunities you have in the coach world is to like craft your own pathway in regards to the plans you have for your athletes. It's based on like your accolades, I suppose, or like how your athletes perform. And then you get to recreate that the next year or try new things for your athletes. But in the other side of things, you know, sometimes you don't get that autonomy, or sometimes you do get that autonomy, but it looks very different. It looks very narrowed in, or it's very industry focused. I mean, honestly, I could see the parallels if you ask me. Both sides can have both. I think it's what you make of it. But on the athletic side, I always felt like I had like this freedom to kind of like create this or mold these student athletes to be these, I guess, great athletes that I wanted them to see later, and then also go do great things after their time here at WashU. And as an administrator on the other side, it's like, I guess I feel like the bad guy on the other side as the administrator, but on the coach side, it's all fun. But on the other side, it's like, I don't know.
I think I'm like Heather, I have not known any other profession or career and have loved it. And as I said earlier, I feel very fortunate to have been in it, and most days feel that it's just sort of amazing that I'm being paid to do this. I think like probably a lot of careers, you focus early on the wins and losses in this case, and it's certainly obvious in sport. And as I've grown through my career and really reflect, and I think it's so much, you know, it's a people business. And that's really what, like, to me, that's the essence and the opportunity is having the opportunity to work with and for others, helping, inspiring, and encouraging others to be the very best they can be. And there are many, I'm sure there are many careers like that, but I think that's certainly one of the things that I've enjoyed very much about, you know, my career in college athletics.
Heather, go ahead.
I just, one thing to me about being in a career in athletics in higher education is it's almost a career within another environment. And I really like that dynamic aspect of it. So I think there are other professions where if you're an accountant, you go and you work for the firm that you're an accountant, and it's just insular and it's about that business entity and the people that are there, and you're all focused on the same outcome. But to me, it's about higher education. And I go back to like my values and the things that are important to me about access to higher education and the experience of students when they are having this very small window of experience at a college or university, and then athletics just being a part of that broader undergraduate experience. So I think it's different in that way because I feel it's much more dynamic in the way that you have an opportunity to intersect within the community that you're a part of. And so when I was on a campus, I was the liaison from athletics over to student affairs, and I loved being able to be on that side of the conversation and integrate the athletic department with residence life and student affairs. And so I think that is different. It's a very dynamic working environment, whether you're on a campus being a collegiate athletic administrator, or even in the role that I'm in now, where I'm not on a single campus, I oversee the conference. I have that opportunity to engage within the NCAA structure and get that same type of like broader perspective within one industry.
We had a question earlier from the course that Jen made reference to, and that was the Integrated Studies course on athlete, commodity, or human. The question is, in your opinion, is more progress needed to equalize men's and women's sports? What can be done to improve the situation, to improve the equality in athletics?
So Simon, the short answer is yes. There are things to be done, and how can that be accomplished? One is through representation. Are more and more women becoming head coaches? Are they becoming athletics directors? Are they becoming commissioners? Are they having those opportunities? And the other thing is money. Funding is really critical as you're moving things forward. And that's true in athletics or in anything, as you're trying to make changes. And so while we have had great progress over the last 50 years, I personally think that there's still a lot of progress that needs to be made in this space.
Louise, I totally agree with you. We've, through these 50 years, we can point to so many things that have improved and opportunities, and we've had, again, lots of successes, but we've not gotten to a point of equality, and we've not gotten to just really even being able to compare and answer the question all the time that in a men's program, that those men would trade for the experience that the women are having. And so I think it's incumbent upon all of us that we have to keep looking, we have to keep asking, we have to really sort of measure and be very clear about where we actually are. And all of us who are committed and realize the importance of the experience that women deserve to have, we have to speak up. And I hope that the NCAA continues and even does more to help, but it really can't be a few organizations or even universities. It's all of us individually that have to keep paying attention, asking questions, and pushing, not only for our sons but for our daughters, and again, being very mindful that they both should enjoy incredible opportunities around sport.
And I would just add, when I was thinking about the initial question that we had, why is this topic important to you? And my response would have been that it's about social justice. This is about, in our society, we don't yet have a collective lens on human rights and equity of opportunity. And so there's Title IX, but there's the 14th Amendment, and there's the 16th Amendment, and there's the 19th Amendment, and there's Title VI and Title VII. And we have these things because they're still on the books, and they're still at play, because we as a society are not at a place where we approach life always asking that question, is this equitable? Why is there difference? Should there be change? Equity doesn't have to be equality, but we need to be having those conversations all the time and be active citizens in it. So I know someone had put in the Q&A too, just about being outside of athletics, where Title IX isn't even part of the conversation. And it needs to be, because as Simon opened this whole piece up, it's not about sport. It's about equity and fairness and education. And, it started at the time when it was about girls and women having access to educational opportunities. But what it's done over 50 years is say, you also can't discriminate based on sexual orientation, and you can't discriminate based on gender identity. And we need to continue to educate one another and those in the conversation about this. And I would just say, you can hear my voice getting high, because it's what I'm passionate about. This is, at the end of the day, it's a social justice issue. And these opportunities aren't about what your identity is. It's about opportunities that we've said you should be able to have access to if you are part of our society in the US. And we fail in so many ways in that regard. And won't go down the political routes, but it's happening. It happens in elections. It happens in voting access. It happens in access to housing. It happens in access to employment outside of sport. And so I think it's just being an active and engaged advocate for social justice and for equity of opportunity. And we have 150 years of where we've had to try to legislate behavior that should just simply be the way of treating other people the way that you would like to be treated. To Joni's point, like, how do I want to experience sport? I want to experience it in the best possible environment. And that doesn't matter what my identity is. It should look the same. Sport is sport. So yeah, absolutely. We all have to be part of that process.
I think that I'm going to conclude with one other question from Jen Braun's Integrated Studies course. And if none of the panelists can answer this question, maybe someone in the audience can. And the question is this: their class recently watched a documentary on 6-on-6 high school girls basketball in the state of Iowa, and how females were celebrated as high school athletes much earlier than in many other states. Is anyone on the panel or anyone in the audience familiar with this? And if so, can you comment on why you think that 6-on-6 basketball was so successful in the Hawkeye State?
I don't know why, but my thought, so you work at Iowa State. My family, my brother went to Iowa State. I went to University of Iowa. So it's a thing with the Cyclone versus the Hawkeye. But Iowa State doesn't have any the state of Iowa doesn't have any professional sports to my knowledge. And so the way they go hard for their high school and college sports is on a whole other level than I've ever seen in other states. To some degree, it makes me think because they don't have a professional team to get behind, they get behind their communities and they get behind the students who are doing these sports and trying to make it, or trying to go to college for these sports, or just excited for them in their high school careers. And I'm not saying I want to get rid of professional sports by any means, but it's something to kind of be in awe of, being able to have been a part of the Iowa community for only 2 years and seeing how invested they are in their students and in their kids doing sports. It was inspiring. So that's my theory on it, but I don't know exactly why.
Well, I think you can see some continuity there in the fact that women's basketball at Iowa State is extraordinarily well supported. I mean, they sell out Hilton Coliseum on a regular basis, which is incredible. I'm going to give thanks to Dwayne Bonifer, who suggests that we look at a book called The Only Dance in Iowa, A History of Six-Player Girls Basketball, published by the University of Nebraska Press in 2004. So there, we don't have the answer, but we do have access to the answer, which for a historian is perhaps almost as good as having the answer itself. So thank you, Dwayne. And I want to say thank you as well to all of our panelists. Thank you to Jen for facilitating this. It has been a remarkable and incredibly enjoyable evening for me to listen to these wonderful people with their fantastic stories, helping us to understand why Title IX is so important, and also perhaps why it has become simply part of the landscape. To hear about the fact that women's sports is, if not taken for granted, certainly becoming more fully integrated into the sports world is important. And so I want to ask you guys if any of you have a last word that you would like to share with the audience.
I would just extend a thank you for participating, taking time during, we all are very busy and it's during the dinner hour, and many of you that are athletes have probably just left practice and then need to get to your studies. So I think this is a topic that's clearly important to those of us that agreed to be on the panel, and for the number of alums from decades and decades ago that tuned in. It's really wonderful to see your comments in the chat and in the Q&A. So just thank you everybody for your interest. and continue to be advocates for all of us.
I would agree. I want to say thank you to Jen for the invitation and Simon for pulling us all together and keeping us on track here tonight with the panel. And thanks to everyone. I think we've made progress. We have many things to do yet to really hit that level of equality that we really want, and all of the women who are playing sport deserve. So let's keep working together and push for that.
I would say if there are any athletes still with us, I'm an example that you can keep a competitor mindset. You can still be an athlete at heart. It doesn't have to stop during your time at Monmouth. You can carry it forward by giving back or by being a mentor to someone else, but also just by keeping that mentality as you move forward. And like Louise said, vocalize what you want, speak it into existence and manifest it for yourself. And even if it doesn't work out the first time and you have to try something else, but just get back up. So that's what I would leave you with.
Simon, I'll round it out with my thanks as well. My panelists said it very well. The only thing I will say is change is not always easy, and it takes courage to be an advocate, and it takes courage to use your voice to say, can we think of something different? And so I encourage everyone who's listening to have that courage. And that's the only way we're going to have change, and to get others to have courage right along with you, so that we can, over the next 50 years, I'm not sure I'll be around to be on a panel, but I believe that it will continue to even change for the better, especially as Heather so eloquently said, that these are just rights that we should have. And hopefully that change will come about with all of us working together.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. And thank you to the audience. Jen, go ahead. You are muted, I'm afraid.
There we go. Thank you so much to all our panelists, Simon, our moderator, and everyone in the audience for joining us for this impactful discussion. I do want to mention a few more events our Title IX panel has planned. We are going to gather on Monmouth campus to watch the women's softball team compete against Ripon College on April 9th. And we also will gather to support the Fighting Scots Society at our annual golf outing on June 24th, which is a day after the 50th anniversary of June 23rd of Title IX. So if you want any more information about those events, please reach out to me. My contact information is on our website. And please take our survey as you leave. We really read your feedback and use it. So thank you. I know I see the chat blowing up as well as my phone here at home about how much people enjoyed tonight. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you to our presenters, all the participants. And I hope you leave inspired and ready to support the women around you in the classrooms, the courts, or in our offices. So everyone have a wonderful week and stay well.